Ever wonder what the owners of seven-figure profit contracting and tradie business owners do differently? Tune into this episode where I outline 8 big ideas that allow a small group of highly successful business owners to achieve not only financial success, but more importantly, lifestyle success. Now, the great news is that any business owner can use these ideas to improve their results today.
So let's start with number 1.
Number 1, I call it the CEO mindset. I know nothing. Yep. Number 2 is that the team builds the business, which was a pain in the backside.
Honestly, it was really frustrating.
Number 3, appoint a 2IC.
That's a key holder, not a 2IC.
Build your management team.
Yeah.
Not sure about that.
Shut up.
Yeah, well, it's not super sexy, but flipping heck, it's important. And this is plan your organization structure. This is about creating the right communication rhythms.
That's why you're doing good.
I have a robust strategy process.
But how do you put foot to ass without the feet?
So I left this till last, but it's... Alrighty, welcome to the podcast. Tony Fraser-Jones here, your host, hanging out with my good mate Phil Smith.
G'day, butter.
Butter.
How are you?
Good, butter.
Good, brother.
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Well, look, hey guys, recently Tony was actually asked to speak to a pretty big group of business owners about what makes business owners super successful. Now, we've got a pretty large coaching business, and we do see a large number of businesses, so we do see what works and also what doesn't. And a lot of these ideas may seem counterintuitive, but I think that's the point, because the successful people really do things differently. And the cool thing is that everyone can start doing the stuff we're going to talk about today. Often it's just a case of knowing the things that you can do differently so you can actually get started on doing them. And on this podcast, I think we don't spend a huge amount of time on how the uber successful operate. And our mission is to help tradies and contractors create the business and life they never knew was possible. And so using these ideas is going to help you get there. So I'm going to interview Tony a wee bit, and he's going to share some ideas, 8 big ideas for running a super successful business. So we'll get started. Tony, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, sir. I'm feeling under pressure already.
Yeah, well, pressure's on you. The limelight's
You're a
on you.
Grueling interviewer.
Yeah, mate. We got 8 big ideas. So let's start with number 1.
Number 1, I call it the CEO mindset. If you're listening and you're a little bit older like me, you could probably remember Hogan's Heroes, which is an awesome TV show. I don't know, back in the 60s or 70s.
I don't remember it.
Don't you?
No, I wasn't alive then.
That explains a lot. Neither was I, but I've seen it. Anyway, they were in a German prisoner of war camp, and these clowns were always trying to escape. And one of the guards was Sergeant Schultz, and every time he hung out with the prisoners a bit, and every time they did something bad or naughty, he was like, "I know nothing, I know nothing." And I think that's actually quite important as to grow a successful business as a CEO. You actually need to know a lot less than you think. You need to know a lot less about what's going on. And what I find, and I find when other coaching business owners talk to me, and when I talk with our successful clients, when people ask them about the tactics and the stuff they do at the ground level of their business, often they have very little idea. They're not out of touch with the grassroots, but they don't know all the specific details about what's happening, about projects and all that sort of stuff, because they don't need to, because if they did, they couldn't grow.
What would happen if they were, right into everything?
Well, I think the problem is that there's an inverse relationship between control and growth. That's probably the key thing is here. So if you need to control everything, then it's very difficult for you to grow. And like a classic example, I was talking with a client last week. Good dude, he's got a reasonably successful business. It's not massive, but it's not small. And he was absolutely fuming about how one of the vans was dirty and had cobwebs on it. He was really fired up about this, and he basically did his nut at one of the tradesmen about cleaning the van. And I was like, bro, that's probably something you're going to have to let go if you want to grow your business. Because one dirty van, that's like, if you try and control everything like that, it's going to be really difficult to grow a business because you're going to be worried about every single little detail. Now, I know this seems counterintuitive, and it hurts like hell when things don't go the way you want. But if you carry all of that, you only have so much energy to go around as a business owner. And so you will not be able to stay on top of everything, and literally you'll blow up. And even more importantly, or detrimentally, if you like, is your team is going to come to you for everything. And you'll become a bottleneck for making decisions, and stuff will just fall over. And they won't feel empowered either, because they won't be prepared to make decisions, or they know that you're going to backstop everything. So I think I know nothing is actually quite a good mentality to take. You've got to let a whole lot of stuff go. You have to let fires burn. You have to let some stuff burn. And I know that's really hard as a business owner, but if you want to grow an uber successful 7-figure profit business and have a great lifestyle, you actually have to let some things burn.
Yeah, well, the big part of that is, you've got other people that are dealing with this stuff. Think about those dirty vans. It's not about not getting the van clean. It's just it's not your job anymore. And I think when you're in that sort of successful space, and to get there, you have to adopt that mindset, and you have to understand that there are other people who are responsible for these things. And just because you don't know how something's working on the ground level doesn't mean that someone doesn't know and that it's not working great. It just means that you can't keep your finger in every pie as you grow. And
this is absolutely critical, and this is one of the big problems I see for contractors and tradie business owners as they grow, as they try to do that and they just cannot stay on top of everything, and it becomes too stressful. They run out of energy and they annoy their team, and people leave and stuff. So I think that's important. That sort of ties into what your identity is. Like, you've got to actually start looking at yourself as a different person, and that's a person who's willing to let go of control, willing to focus on the big picture, not going to get upset by things going wrong. If you judge your worth by any little mistakes, which I know a lot of us do, we find that really difficult to let go, and we have to sort of shift that to actually create a business that can scale as well. So I think that identity is important, and the identity we want to take is that our job as the CEO, as the leader, is actually to make the business work. It's not to do the work. There's a very subtle difference, but it's very powerful. So your job is to make the business work, not to actually do the work. Now, there is work you need to do, but fundamentally, if the business isn't working, if people aren't clear on what they need to do, if there's not a good strategy, if you haven't got systems in place and that, the business isn't working. It's not your job to go and plumb out stuff or dig holes or jump on the digger. Now, you might do that occasionally, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, but that's not your job. That's someone else's job. And that's the whole identity shift that's very, very important to make.
I think it really is a shift, right? Because when you first get started and you're out on your own, or you've got just one or two people with you, unfortunately you do have to do a lot of work. But in order to ever break through that level and go on from there, you have to actually make that shift. And I think that's the word shift here is actually quite important. It's the active word in the sentence, right? Like, because you're going to start off one way, but to become uber successful, there's a shift that needs to happen for you to actually be able to start thinking in terms of leverage and start thinking in terms of getting other people to do stuff. And again, that comes with relinquishing some control and seeing how your role changes and how you need to change with it. So I think this is massive.
And that's your identity. Your role is to make sure that the business works, not to do the work. So it sounds simple. There's a lot to it, but it's incredibly important. And so what you do then is your job is to delegate outcomes to other people, to capable people. And so, for example, your chief estimator becomes responsible for the pricing of the business. They are responsible for making sure there's enough work in front of the business. Not your responsibility anymore. Your responsibility to hold them to account to their responsibility, same as the operations manager. It's his or her job to ensure that the projects are done on time, to budget, and to the standard required. That's their job. It's not your job. And so you hold them accountable to that. And another thing, that's sort of operationally right, but if you need to make improvements to your business, do not ever do projects in your business. What I mean by that is, an example might be, let's say you need a new field software or job management system that you want to put into your business. And this is a big job if you've got a big business. Do not take responsibility for doing it yourself. You have to find someone else in your business who's responsible for it and who makes it happen. Because if you do it, it's going to take up all your time and energy. You're going to take your eye off the ball. You're not going to actually be making sure the business is working. So you've got to try and get yourself out of all the day-to-day operational activities so you can actually focus on where the business is going. So you can keep your headspace clear for learning and your own professional growth, which is what needs to happen for the business to grow. If you want your business to grow, you've got to grow. So it means you've got to learn, you've got to be networking, you've got to be doing stuff to increase your capacity as a business owner. So that's massively important. And that requires you to get out of the way of doing the day-to-day stuff, because the mindset required to actually grow and scale a business, create a super successful business, is quite different than an operational mindset. You have to be operationally strong, of course, fundamental, but that's someone else's responsibility. You've got to be in the space of looking at the big picture, seeing where the problems are, where the opportunities are, all that sort of stuff. And that's quite a proactive mindset. So if your mind's always filled with urgent problems and phone calls and who's collecting the money and who's following up the bids and quotes, and you just can't do that. They don't match up. This is a big problem that I see the people who don't make the jump yet, is they're stuck in that urgent day-to-day thinking, which doesn't actually allow them to actually think about the big picture.
Yeah, that's massive.
And so, but it doesn't mean you won't have problems. And
Well, you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with those?
Yeah, the fires are there. And so you might have a particular area of your business is not going well. And as a CEO of an effective, profitable, larger business, you don't have the time or the ability to deal with everything at once. And so what you've got to do is you've got to choose, if there's an area that's a concern, you just focus on that. And you leave, like I said, let the other fires burn. So let's say you've got an issue in the area of pricing and estimating. You might partner with the key person in that business and really spend some time with them, helping them get things back on track.
Well, there's a key word here. What does partner mean? Because I think people may be a bit confused about that. So can you dig into that?
So it's very important to partner. There's two ways you can do this. You can go in there and tell them what's wrong and they need to pull their socks up and start doing stuff for them and working in there and making stuff happen, which will work maybe in the short term. But that's not partnering with them. That's just jumping in and taking over. Partnering with them is walking alongside them, helping them learn what they need to learn to actually be successful. And often, for them, you've had to change your idea of your identity as a leader and an owner. You've got to help them do the same. And so maybe your lead estimator was an estimator you employed at the start when there was only him or her. Now they have 2 or 3 people in their team. They've had to go through a whole process of growing as well. They've got to become leaders as well. You've got to take them through that process, partner with them through that so that they can get results in their area. So you don't take over, you just work with them and walk with them. Obviously, if they don't come up to scratch, you've got to do something. But you partner with the problem area rather than just taking over, because that's great for culture. And the last thing for me, as the CEO, as that mindset, is understanding that it's the boring stuff that makes you money. Like, this is massive. It's so easy to, and I see it all the time, people get dragged off by shiny objects. You need to do the boring stuff really well, which is like market, be prompt with your quotes, make sure you've got good processes for quality, check all the supply, make sure your team's checking all the material prices from the supplier, check all the packing slips and stuff, make sure the invoices are sent quickly, follow up quickly. Just do the basics consistently and well for a long period of time, and your business will be successful. And the reason for that is almost all businesses can't do that. And the super successful ones are the ones that do. So just focus on the basics and do it consistently well. That makes a huge payoff in the long term.
Yeah, that's a point I really want to stand out to everyone listening is it's that boring stuff, guys. It's the stuff you do day in, day out, operational excellence. It's what's going to really get you ahead. The shiny objects are often not the answer. So I think that's a really good way to look at idea number 1. So idea number 1 was the CEO mindset. Let's look at idea number 2.
Yep. Number 2 is that the team builds the business. And this is very important. So the super successful business owners, they understand that the team's job is to grow and run the business. It's to grow and run the business. Your job, sort of ties to what we said earlier, is to grow and lead the team. So you become like a step back from the coalface, from the action as it were. You become more of a coach and an organizer and making sure that the people you have on your team are the right people in the right place with the right tools to do the job. And so when I say run the business, that probably makes sense in the sense that they do the jobs, they do the stuff, but you also want them growing the business. So you want them coming up with ideas. You want your marketing team to be coming up with ideas for marketing. You want your sales and your bidding and estimating team to be, focusing on the sales process and making improvements to it. Because you can't rely on you to come up with all the improvements in the business. You need to start getting the team in a situation where they actually are coming to you with ideas and thoughts about how they make things better. That's massively important. Because if it's just relying on all your ideas, you're only one person, you'll run out of ideas, and you can't be as deep and expert in the area as the people who actually run those areas. I think that's a massive thing. Yeah,
I think we've got a shift happening here again, because when you're just starting out, you're obviously going to be looking at, you have to be running the business, but obviously the people that are super successful and they're starting to get a larger business and there's more complexity to it, there's a real shift where you have to be able to relinquish that to the team, and not only do they do the stuff, but they're ideating and innovating and implementing new strategies and ideas, and they're going to own that too. But I think there's more of a switch here in terms of the team building the business, right? Like it's the type of leader you are.
Yeah, like I mentioned, you become, rather than an external coach, you become an internal coach and leader to your team. I think is massively important. They really need that if they're going to reach their potential. And 2 sort of key things here is you actually have to become exceptionally good at hiring good people. That's one of the keys that exceptional leaders and highly successful business owners who have huge profit and great lifestyles, they're great at hiring people. And the next step for that is they actually don't hire the people anymore. Their team do the hiring. This is where growth really takes off. So this is like, you hire people, which is awesome. But once you have other people in your business hiring people, that's where the magic really starts to happen. Look, we found it in our business, and we've seen it in other businesses. At a certain stage of growth, I was involved in all the hiring, which was a pain in the backside. You can probably speak to that a little bit because I know how frustrating that was for you.
Honestly, it was really frustrating. One of the biggest frustrations actually was, for those of you listening, was that Tony's time was getting pretty short at the time. Not that he was actually thrashing himself to death at the coalface. It was more that, you had a lot of stuff going on outside of work, and you had other things that you were working on, and we had to dedicate real time to strategy and things like that. And so then when we're hiring a lot, which we always are, we're hiring a lot of people all the time. And when you get to that bigger size business, like we got clients we work with, which, they got 100 odd staff, 200 staff, and employees. And when you're looking at those kind of numbers, you're always hiring because, firstly, growth is not as difficult. Like taking on 3 more guys when you've got 3 is doubling your business, but 3 more guys when you have 200 is like a very small change. So you're always hiring. Secondly, is when you have a lot of staff, every now and then one leaves or gets sick or goes away for an extended holiday.
Goes lame.
So there's always people that need to be replaced as well. So you're always hiring. And the hard part with us was Tony wasn't always available. And so when he had to be involved in the hiring process, it was a pain because we just couldn't hire fast enough, basically based on your schedule. And you'll get to that point in your trades business where you are the bottleneck with hiring simply because you just can't be in that many interviews. So one of 2 things happen. Either you don't hire or you start doing a bad job of it because you cut corners based on the fact that you have no time to do this properly. So, for us, our department heads partner with managers within their department, and we've got a recruitment guy as well. And so we have a team that hires differently depending on the different roles. And Tony has no idea who we hire. They turn up at team meeting and he's messaging me, who's that?
And this happens with a lot of our clients as well. And some of them have found that when they were still involved in the hiring process, they'd miss out on good people because they weren't going through the process quickly enough.
You just can't.
This is a big problem. So you get good at hiring and you delegate the process of hiring to your team members, and then growth explodes.
Yeah, massive.
And you have to actually be prepared to let your team fail. I can think of a client recently who employed an IT specialist in their business. We were talking to them and it became pretty clear that their manager who had hired this person was having some issues with this person and thought that they were, maybe not coming up to scratch. We talked with this person and it's like, well, you got a choice to make. Do you keep them or do they go? Our client was like concerned that their manager wouldn't make the right call because he kind of knew that this person needed to go. And we were like, hey man, you have to let this person make the call, because if you don't let them make the call and you jump in and fix it, then next time they won't have learnt the lesson.
Yeah.
And so you have to be prepared to let them stub their toe as they actually build their team as well. That's very, very important, because if you still, as the leader, jump in and fix all those problems, they don't learn, and you've got the same issue next time. So that's a big issue.
Only probably at more scale, because your business is still growing, and now there's higher stakes, more going on, everyone's busier, and you've got more scale, and still a team that hasn't learned.
That's right.
And you'll run into even bigger problems. So I think you have to build that team, and you've got to help them develop by letting them do their job and letting them fail sometimes and coaching them through that. It's massive.
The learning you went through was all those things. You've made mistakes. You've kept people that you shouldn't have kept, whatever. They need to go through the same process because they're almost building little businesses within the business now. Yeah. And so that's the process they go through.
And if you hold on to it, you're gatekeeping the development of your people, and it's going to be an issue. So let's look at idea number 3.
Number 3. Wow, this is a very good one. Appoint a 2IC.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah. This is massive. I don't mean a second in charge who's just does it while you're away.
That's a key holder. It's not a 2IC.
Yeah, see, what happens, a lot of businesses will have someone who's like a right-hand person, and when you go away, they sort of take over. But that's a problem because it's always a stopgap measure, because that person then has 2 jobs when you go away. So they can typically do neither job that well because they're completely tapped out. What I see is people who have great profit but have a great lifestyle as well. And this one's really important for the lifestyle side of it and the profit as well. But they basically run the business. Like that's the setup we have. You came on as the COO in this business and has made just an enormous difference. You can run the business with or without me. Sometimes I think you'd prefer it without me, and sometimes I think you quite like it when I'm here. I'm just not too sure.
Quite frankly, I mean, like if we look at a job description, there's not a lot on your list, and that's the way it needs to be, so that you have space to bring the creativity that we need, and this works really well for our partnership. So I think the key is like day to day, you don't run the business at all. From a strategic level, obviously that's where you come in, but day to day stuff, no. And I think the key with this is when you're looking at that 2IC and you're bringing them on, there's a temptation where you get them across a task, or they develop an ability and they're able to take that off your plate, but you tend to hold on to it just for when you're away. Which is the mistake we're talking about here. So once they've got it, you need to let them keep it and don't take it back. And so can you speak to that?
Yeah. The aim is to help them grow and develop.
Yeah.
And in many respects, you're looking to replace yourself in the business, which is what you want to do, because you have to replace yourself in your business for the business to grow, because at every level, there's another level.
Yeah.
And so what I've found is with the members we help, if you can think of some of the plumbing businesses or electrical businesses got $20, $30 million in revenue, the job of the CEO there is quite different than a $10 million business or a $5 million business. It's completely different. And so you have to free up your time to actually focus on that stuff. And it's more relationship building and it's strategy, and it's thinking about the team and the culture and a bunch of other stuff that you need the space for. So the 2IC is massive. That's that person you rely on who you know's got everything covered, so that you can actually leave the business for a period of time and it's all taken care of in a very competent way, not in a stopgap, half-assed kind of Band-Aid kind of way, which is what most people do, and that's a mistake.
Well, I know there'd be a lot of people out there that are thinking, man, I'd love to find this unicorn, so what do they look for?
Yeah, I think the first thing is complementary skills. You don't necessarily want another you, because you're already still in the business, so you can bring some of those key skills. And for example, in our business, I'm a creative person. I see this a lot with CEOs, big picture ideas. I'm a little bit all over the show, lots of ideas, want them all done now, which is a pain in the ass sometimes, but whatever.
It's a massive pain in the ass.
Whereas yourself, more organised, better able to get done. And sometimes I'm like, that's way too simple, and you're making it too complicated. So, you have someone who's complementary. You might be the other way around, whatever it is, that someone complements your skills. So that's part of it. And then good communication is the other part of it. So you've got to have really regular comms. We meet twice a week. I know a bunch of people who have GMs or COOs who meet on a fortnightly, on a bi-weekly, is that right?
Twice a week is a confusing one, because it can mean twice a week. It can also mean once every 2 weeks. So 2 times a week is what we do, and that works really well. One of them's a longer meeting where we go through everything in that meeting. One's a shorter catch up at the end of the week, which is has anything cropped up and we can't wait until next week. So it's temperature check.
And the next thing is with your 2IC is make sure you're on the same page before talking to the kids. This is really important. So if there's key issues or stuff, make sure you have your most vigorous arguments in private. You can still argue in public, and that's kind of good sometimes to see that, but make sure you've got the key stuff covered off so you can present a united front, because otherwise divide and conquer happens. So, but pointing a 2IC is, I see, massively important for uber successful people. It's just a key rock.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to idea number 4. So what's that?
Build your management team. And so that means you need heads of department. You notice this starts to sound a little bit more corporate, and there's a reason for that. That's what you need to grow a successful business and have time. So you need to have appoint key people to the key areas. So that might be operations head, a marketing head, finance head, an admin head, pricing head. You need those key heads of departments who's responsible for the operations of that department. I mean fully responsible for all of it. They're responsible for growing the team in that area, for the hiring, the firing. They're responsible for the department for performance. They do any projects in that area. They're responsible for making those happen. And your job as a leader is to pour your love into those heads of departments to make them exceptional. That's the key. You've got to make them exceptional, and that means they're going to have to go through some of the same processes that you've gone through to grow as a leader as well. And a lot of these heads of departments are going to be dealing with profit lines that are bigger than most businesses. Other businesses. So they're quite high-level people. So get high-level people, pay properly, don't try and do it cheap. You want winners, weapons, A players, people who are just super motivated, love what you're doing, and help them, what we call develop the first team. I think it's from Pat Lencioni's brilliant writer. They become the first team, and those department heads are, they're collectively responsible for the performance of the business.
Yeah. And I think
as
for
a whole.
simplifying this, like most trades businesses are going to have 4 key functions. You might end up with more if you specialize
Depending on
more.
the size of the business, yeah.
But generally, you're going to have one department which is responsible for winning work. So it's like marketing and sales.
Yeah.
You'll have one department which is responsible for pricing work and estimating. You'll have one department which is responsible for getting the jobs done. So it's your operations. And you'll have one department which is basically everything else. It's admin.
Admin, finance type thing.
Finance, all that kind of thing. It all sits in their HR.
Some special people have an HR department.
Yeah.
Not sure about that.
Yeah. Some people will split marketing and sales. That's fine if you've got a big enough team in those departments. That's fine. But I think at its core, you've got one department where their responsibility is to make sure you have enough work. You have another department whose responsibility is to make sure that all your work is priced to the right margin in a timely manner so you can actually have a good chance at winning those jobs at a good rate. You got one department whose job is to get all the jobs done, to what we budgeted, and keep the wheels moving as far as execution. And you got one department that's responsible for making sure all the back end runs smoothly. And that's it. And they need to own those roles. So that's essentially that first team.
And the key here is that they are responsible. It's not your job. Anything in operations belongs to the head of operations.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, okay, what happens if they muck it up? Well, here's how the super successful people make sure they don't, and they keep control of their business without having to control everything. And it's all about, we call it optics or transparency on numbers. And this is what they do. Every week, the head of that department brings a report of the performance of that department to the management team meeting, and they present the figures. It's as simple as that. And so they're responsible for gathering all the figures, all the data, report it to the management team, and that way they own the results. They can see where the results aren't up to scratch already, which means before they come to the meeting, they will have thought about what's gone on or what hasn't gone on, what needs to be improved, and then they present that to the team. And that is an incredibly powerful way of basically helping them take total ownership of the results. And then as a team, so those meetings are not a beat-up session. They're as a team, how do we help each other hit the results that we want? Yeah. And so sometimes the results won't be where you want. I mean, often they're not. That's the way things are. That's okay.
Yeah, things ebb and flow, right?
And so sometimes at those meetings, your operations manager might be saying, hey, man, this is what I've tried with all of these things. Is there anything else you think I've missed, or what else do you think I could do? And you talk about that and you support each other. So that's incredibly powerful. And each of those departments will have a dashboard, the optics that they present to the team. And that's how you as the owner or the senior leader keeps an eye on what's going on. Because you'll know, honestly, one of the key things these super successful people do is they understand those numbers and they have a real feel. As soon as they see something they know, it's a little bit out. And they'll know kind of what the issues are already, and they can actually help with that.
Now, if that's a bit daunting, one thing I do find is that it's looking at the numbers here and the optics. If that's new to you, the first time you do it, you might feel a wee bit like you're Neo on day one in the real world, and you're looking at the matrix, and all you see is ones and zeros. It's just going by on the screen. It doesn't mean anything to you. It's just a bunch of numbers. But the more you do this, the more you look at it, and the more you do it as a team and interrogate the numbers and ask each other questions and hear the backstory, you end up a little bit more like Cypher, who's sitting there watching the ones and zeros, and he's like, what I'm seeing is woman in a red dress, woman in a brown dress. But he's seeing the picture of what's on the screen, whereas Neo's just seeing the ones and zeros. And I think in this case it's the same. When you first start looking at the numbers, you'll just see a bunch of numbers. But the more you look at it, you see the story. You can see everything right there, and your whole team through this process will actually get to that stage where they can all see the story in the numbers, and they become very, very helpful to each other. It's a really, really good place for accountability, for help, for support, and you start working really well as a team to solve the issues in the business.
The key with this big idea is build your management team and then provide accountability by them owning the numbers that they have. That's the big idea, and it's incredibly powerful. And if you're a small business, just with a few people, this might seem a long way away, but this is a podcast about helping you understand what it looks like for a 7-figure business when you've got great time off. And you're not going to go from where you are to there in a year. This is a process that's taken some of these people 5-10 years. But you can see that, in your business, there might be some numbers you need to start tracking straight away. And that's the step you take out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that brings us to idea number 5. So what have we got?
Well, it's not super sexy, but flippin' heck, it's important. And this is plan your organization structure.
Oh, yeah.
And so what that means is that most problems and bottlenecks and lack of growth and stress problems are resulted from structure problems. And what we mean by that is you don't have the right people in the right place, or enough of the right people in the right place, often to do the work you have now, and definitely to grow. So there's two parts to that. Often you're under-resourced for the situation now, and you're 100% under-resourced to grow, because growing takes capacity. If the reactor's already at 100%, it's very hard to get more power out of it. It's the same in your business. And so what we need to do is build your structure, and we need to do it in advance. And what does structure mean? Basically, it's like a tree diagram with all the roles in your business, starting with the CEO, then the department heads, and then the people under that. So it's like a visual picture of the roles in the business that you need. And you need to draw this out, and you need to do it in advance, because to grow your business, you've got to have some more people typically.
Could you clarify for everyone listening, what do we mean by drawing it in advance?
Well, what that means is if you don't have enough people, if your revenue is at $2 million and all your tradespeople are tapped out, you cannot do $2.5 million or $3 million in revenue. It's impossible. And so you're going to need more tradespeople or technicians to actually make that happen, which means you need to hire those people before it can happen. And if you hire those people, say to go from 2 million to 3 million, maybe you need another 4 tradespeople. That means you're going to need a bunch more estimating and pricing to be done.
Well, you simply can't price enough work to win that much more.
Which means odds on you're probably going to need another person to do pricing, or at least some more pricing capacity. That's fine. Okay, we've got the tradespeople and the pricing capacity now, but all of a sudden we actually need some more leads.
Well, otherwise there's
inquiries.
nothing to price.
There's nothing to price. So it's like, okay, actually we need to hire a marketing admin, or a marketing student, or a marketing coordinator, or a marketing manager to actually grow the leads in the business. And so we're going to have to do that in advance. So we actually start planning out how the structure needs to look for where we want to head. We basically do that with some numbers. And I'm not going to get into that today because it's quite detailed, but we know for most trade businesses what the numbers are. It's like a tradesperson might do $250,000 to $350,000 in revenue.
Per year.
So therefore we know how many people we need to do an extra $1 million in revenue. And we know how much work one person can price, roughly speaking. So we know how many people we need to hire, and so on and so on. And then, as that business grows, you need to make sure that you've got appropriate spans of control, which means like if you've got 20 tradespeople, you're going to need more than one operations manager, because it's just be chaos. So we know, maybe 6 people per manager is about right.
Yep. Generally.
So if you've got 20 tradespeople, you're going to need 3 to 3.5 supervisors for them.
And that's not half a person, by the way. That's if you're on half, you need a fourth.
That's right.
You can't just have legs walking around managing people. It doesn't work too well. Generally, they need an upper half as well. So
I think for management, the upper half would be more useful than the lower half.
Yeah, but then again, how do you put foot to ass without the feet?
That's very true. Maybe a side. You could slice them.
Yeah, it could work. Anyway, half a person's pretty difficult to get. So
the point is you have to actually build that structure out to grow the business. Otherwise, it doesn't grow. And what you will find is if you're starting to have issues with quality, service, it's because you don't have the right structure. And typically it's because you as the owner or one of your key managers is absolutely tapped out. They can't stay across everything, so your structure is wrong. The super successful people are really clear on structure and resourcing things appropriately. The right people in the right seats and doing it in advance, so you've actually got the capacity to grow. That's very important. I know it's super scary. You're like, oh my God, I have to spend money before I make it. Yeah.
Also, I just want to highlight here that I think a lot of the time we first start doing this with people, they just don't really understand the importance. They're like, well, hey, drawing out this diagram, I mean, like, yeah, it's cool, it's handy, but like, what do we really do with it? But the point is, we get them to draw their structure as it is now, and we draw the structure as it will be, down the road, based on the calculations we work through. And so that's what we mean by drawing in advance. So you can see this is the difference between where I am and the way the team looks, and where it needs to be and how it needs to look at that point, which really highlights to you in a visual way what your management capacity needs to look like, what your pricing capacity needs to look like, what your admin capacity needs to look like, who will report to who needs to be able, what roles are vacant, what do we need to hire, what promotions do we need to make, if it's a promotion, what skill sets do we need to work on with the people we're going to promote. But you can see it all right there in advance, and then you can really sow before you reap. Whereas I think a lot of the time we see people at lower stages, and you're building your business a bit like a Frankenstein. Like you need something, so you just quickly slap it on, and then you need something, so you slap it on, and eventually it creates a big issue, and then you've got to go and fix it in retrograde. But if you're doing this in advance, you can avoid a lot of the painful bottlenecks along the way, and basically just smash on. And so this is a really big trait of successful people, is they take the time to plan this and draw this and, like think about the structure and how it will look and the reporting lines and everything. That's why they keep crushing it. It's because they're not constantly stalling on their Frankenstein.
That's right. And the people who are doing 10, 15, 20, $30 million, they're making $1, $2, $3 million net. Not only do they have operations managers, but they start to build middle levels of management. So the operations manager will have 3 project managers or 4 foremen under them, which then allow you to keep control of the jobs because you may not be able to control all the jobs. Your operations manager is put in place. The business gets so big they can't control all the jobs. So you keep building, and you do that in advance so you can keep control of the business. That's how you do it. So that's massive. Planning the organisation structure, doing it in advance is definitely, that's a big idea you've got to get your head around to be successful, and that's what those guys who are successful do.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's get on to idea number 6.
So this is about creating the right communication rhythms. Now, obviously, as your business gets big, you can't be with everyone. You literally cannot talk to everyone. In fact, it's one of the frustrations I think most of us who have a bigger business now is like, it's kind of a bummer you can't chat with everyone. It's just not possible because you'd never do anything else. And so what you need to do is create clear pathways in the business for the comms to run down and up, so everyone knows what's happening because that's how you keep the thing together. And I know most people who think about a big business get stressed about it getting out of control. And this is how you help it to stay in control. You don't control everything, but you keep it in control by making sure that the rhythms are there. And what that means is you have to block and book all the meetings in advance and never cancel. So you have to spend, basically at the start of the year, map out where all the meetings are, the team meetings, the strategy meetings, the operations meetings, the marketing meetings, the estimating meetings. They're all in people's calendars, and you never cancel them. This is massively important. The bigger the business, the more important the meetings are. The meeting actually creates the control. That's about the communication, the accountability. And it's funny, we think, more meetings is bad, but it's actually better.
Yeah.
More better meetings. Because what it does is it means you don't have all those side meetings.
Yeah.
The corridor conversations, the ad hoc stuff, the catch-ups of trying to figure stuff out because there's a space where you can actually talk about stuff. So that's...
And meetings run to time. So instead of we catch up randomly in a hallway and talk for 40 minutes, that was a meeting. But we didn't call it a meeting. Instead, we make a meeting that actually happens, runs to time, follows an agenda, gets a result.
Has all the right people at the meeting.
And the hallway conversation doesn't happen. So, we often say, less is more. With meetings, more is less. If you have more meetings, you actually end up having less meetings. You're just not having all those little side conversations that you weren't counting before. But they do count. They were happening.
And these meetings count. They have a purpose. You don't mix up the purposes of the meetings as well. If you're having a meeting about the strategy of the business and your big goals for the next 3 years or 1 year, you don't talk about specific jobs at that meeting.
Or whether we should change brand of toilet paper.
Right.
It's not the place for it.
It's not the place. Speaking about jobs and stuff would happen at operations meetings.
Yeah.
Not at a strategy meeting. And so the structure, I guess these two go together. You've got your structure mapped out, who reports to who and what roles you need. And then the communication rhythms, put on top of that is how you keep this thing hanging together. And that's what the really successful people do. They've got that dialed in. So they know, everyone knows what they need to do. The communication is running, and the accountabilities are clear as well. That's massively important.
Yeah, that's huge. Did you want to go into just some basic types of meetings?
Yeah, so the meetings that we find work really well in super successful businesses is a weekly management meeting.
So this is your heads of department.
Heads of departments. A weekly department meeting. So each department will have a meeting.
So that's within that department.
Yeah. This is some real gold. This helps massively, and I see this with the successful people we work with. They have a weekly 20 with each staff member. This is the secret sauce because as a business gets bigger, it's easy for it to lose personality and intimacy and feel. And so each person in the business has a coaching session with their boss for 20 minutes, and it's really about them and how they're going in the business and whether they're winning and what they're struggling with and any issues they're having and what they might want to learn or improve on.
I think when you say boss here, if you could explain that in a little bit more detail, because I think sometimes we get a bit confused and we say, hey, but I'm the boss. But if you got 200 people in your employ, you're not all of their boss.
That's right.
And so can you explain that?
And so, for example, in your operations team, you've got the CEO, you might have a COO, you might have an operations manager, and then they might have project managers. And the tradespeople might report to the project managers. So the tradespeople's boss is the project manager, and the project manager would do their 20. It's kind of like their pastoral care. It's that person who you report to who's kind of got your back, is looking after you in the business.
An ops manager does the project manager's 20. COO does the ops manager's 20. CEO does the COO's 20. COO probably does the CEO's 20 in reverse as well, because otherwise who does that? So like, yeah, everyone needs their space and their time to be focused on them and how they go.
I think that's important. And then you will need a regular all hands meeting, and that might depend on how you do it. You know, if you've got a large business, you may not do that every week. It might be every month. You might do it every week virtually. You know, that can all work. But that's really about values and celebrating wins and what's going well. And then you just have all your other regular meetings planned in advance. So it might be your strategy meetings, your training meetings, all that sort of stuff, and your performance reviews. It's all planned in advance so it can happen. And that's the way you make it stick, by doing it in advance. That's what the winners really do.
Yeah, well, if there's a conversation that needs to happen with people, you create a place for it with a meeting. If you're chief estimator and chief operations manager, need to talk about the way the GP's been going, because obviously one of them's setting the price, the other one's executing it. So there's a meeting every week where they talk about that. There needs to be a place for it. Otherwise, it may not happen. It might not happen properly. It happens in hallways, and basically you just need to create space. That's the key.
The more we talk about these big ideas, the more I realise they're really boring. And if you're listening, you're probably thinking, wow, this is like kind of boring. But I think that's the real point here.
But if you have a larger business and you're listening to this and thinking it's boring, what you're probably doing is you're probably missing these big ideas, which is why your business is probably chaotic. Anyone who's listening to this with a larger business and hanging on every word, I guarantee it's probably because your business is doing a bit better. If you're actually doing these basics, that's why you're doing good. It's really that simple.
Yeah. So I think the basics are huge.
So let's get on to idea 7.
Number 7, have a robust strategy process. And what that means is be really clear on where you're heading and what the important priorities in the business are to get you there. Because here's what I've found in growing a successful business and helping hundreds of people do it. Overwhelm kills motivation and results. It's so easy in a big business, there's so much shit going on. To try and do lots of stuff to make it better is a big mistake. And so your strategy process has got to make sure you focus on the less that is more. And you choose the smallest number of things to work on to get the biggest result, or done pays the bills. So what I mean by that is set a revenue target and a profit target for 6 months' time. Just work back, build the structure you need and the resourcing you need to make it happen, and then figure out what are the key 4 or 5 projects that are going to help you get there. That's it.
And again, the best tool you can bring to this meeting is scissors. Just whatever you can cut, that's great. It means you'll actually finish the other stuff. If you take on too much, you'll never finish a mouthful.
This is so important. And so often the most impactful stuff you can do from a strategy process, from a goal-setting process, is to just figure out who you need to hire and make that happen.
That's it, especially when your business is getting bigger. I mean, because it's all about getting the right person into that role, making sure you have capacity in that department, and then that's going to do the damage.
Another example might be, hey, maybe you're having issues punching through the pricing, and you're like, actually, we need to go through and fix up all our pricing templates and our estimating process. Make that a project for like 3 months, and that's all you work on.
Yeah.
And if you get that across the line, it's a massive result. Don't work on that and getting a new supplier for your vans and tendering all the material purchasing and doing a new website and getting a new social media thing, like doing 6 or 7 things at once.
You just won't do them all.
You can't do them. So less is more. Bring the scissors and be just crystal clear on the smallest amount of stuff that's going to give you the biggest result, because, as I said, done pays the bills, and it's so good for your motivation. And the people who are successful, they stay highly motivated because they're winning, and they're winning because they do enough to win but no more. Yeah. Because it is very much diminishing returns after that.
Yeah, totally. And a few different types of strategy meetings that are good to put in place to make this work.
That helps massively, and the winners have a cadence to strategy, so they don't just make up meetings as they go along. Typically, they have an annual strategy planning day, and often it's a couple of days where the senior leadership team goes away and figures out what's important for the year. They have a quarterly day, 1 day directional, where they sit down and map out what's going to happen for the next quarter. In some ways, that's the most important meeting.
Well, that's where you get into the most detail in terms of setting your targets and making your structure.
There's a monthly half-a-day strategy meeting where you basically just review your progress on the quarter and how the business is tracking for that previous month. And then there's the weekly tactical meeting, which is just your weekly managers meeting. And so you lock that stuff in, your management team's dialed in, and everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, and you're kicking goals. So let's get on to idea number 8.
So I left this till last, but it's just massive, and the winners the guys and girls who crush it understand that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think Keith Cunningham wrote the book,
The Road Less Stupid.
The Road Less Stupid. A lot of the winners have read that as well. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. So whilst we said strategy is really important, and it is, the right culture in your business is everything. And that's basically the way people operate around here, the behaviors that they have and the attitudes that they bring. And this is just everything. And when the culture's strong, people do the right stuff because that's just the way it's done. And when the culture's weak, they do the wrong stuff because that's just the way it's done.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do here and what the winners do is they define the values of the business. They're really crystal clear on what we stand for here. And they spend time on that. And it's not something that's just put in a drawer. It's something that's front and center all the time. And then they walk the talk. Most importantly, they hire for fit. So they choose people who fit those values. Now, I can think of one particular plumbing business, big business, probably 150 employees, and they're quite edgy. They have a lot of young people in their business. They do some pretty interesting, cool stuff on social media. It's a bit kind of edgy, but that's their culture. And older guys are a bit more kind of, stuffy and stuff, who might be great employees in one place. They're never going to fit in this place, and that's not the way they roll. They're young, energetic, great vibe, and so they hire those type of people, and they build those type of people. There's other businesses who are different. They're more older, mature, established type things, and maybe that's the way they roll, and that's fine.
Yeah, and they'll pick up that other person that wouldn't have fit.
Won't be as much fun, but
but it will be for those people.
That's right.
And I think that's the key, is because people fit where they fit, and so then they feel comfortable there, they thrive there. And so if you're picking people that fit with your culture, then they'll be comfortable here and they'll thrive here. And that's really the key is, if you're getting people that are constantly a right fit, then they're in an environment where they can win, and that makes all the difference.
So the winners, the guys who are crushing it, great profit, great business, great lifestyle, they just focus on this culture piece. They hire for fit and they reinforce the values consistently, and they do that through the meetings. Now, this is something that we do and we've taught a lot of our members to do in our all hands meeting. We have to show an appreciation for another team member, and we do the appreciation, and we explain to the rest of the team what values that supports. Massively important. Performance reviews. There's always a section in there on how do you actually support the values. How well do you stack up against the values? So that's massive. And with the culture piece, and I think this is definitely something that the winners share, is they care. They actually care. Sometimes too much. But they definitely care about not only the results, but they care about the people in the business. And I think that's something that's very hard to fake.
Yeah.
So the best way to show that you care is to actually care.
It does help.
It does help. They make it fun and they win. Because a great team is a winning team. And that's why the numbers and all the optics are important, because the team can see that you're winning. And so a winning team is a team that builds a great culture as well.
Yeah, this is massive. All right, well, we've covered off 8 massively big ideas here for very, very strong businesses that are uber successful. And I think, honestly, if you're getting into this today and you're listening to these 8 ideas, you are noticing a few things. Like, number one is they're actually quite simple at their core. There's a lot of nuance to them, and they're not easy to do, but they are simple. But these are the things that really do make a difference at that bigger stage. And for those of you listening that are not quite that far along yet, that's totally cool. You don't need to make all these changes right at once, but you work towards these. And this is where you're headed. If you want to have something that's going to be bigger, it's going to be way more profitable, and it's going to give you the time, like you noticed. And so we've seen it time and time again that this makes all the difference. So do you have any parting words?
I do. I think that the thing here is there is 8 big ideas here. And as I mentioned earlier, some of them are actually quite counterintuitive. They're like, oh man, that's going to feel a bit awkward. And so the thing that these super successful people do is they actually have shifted their identity and their attitude around things. And so they have a different attitude to fear and trying stuff. They realize they don't ask the question is, how much will this cost me? They're like, well, what's going to cost me if I don't do this? And they actually focus on what the gain is, and not what the potential downside is. They're not blind to the downside, but they know if they keep doing the same thing, they're not actually going to grow a business. And so they're able to action these ideas by taking a really proactive and positive approach to their values and their risk appetite as well. And I think that's massive. In fact, they don't even see it as risk. They see standing still as risk. Yeah. Because if you're standing still, basically your business is rotting. Yeah.
And so if you're green, you're growing, in the words of Ray Kroc. So let's land this plane.
Having a highly profitable business and having a great lifestyle is totally achievable, but it does require from us to reinvent the way we actually think about and approach our business. Remember, there is an inverse relationship between control and growth, and your role is to build your team, and their role is to build your business. Thanks heaps for listening. We'll catch you all again next time.
See you later.
Congratulations on being part of a select group of savvy business owners who are taking their businesses to the next level. And to help you on your journey, don't forget to check out our show notes for a copy of our free book, The Profitable Tradie, and other valuable resources. Thanks for being a part of this special group, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Profitable Tradie podcast.